I'm Naomi, and today I am planting a big pot combination of bulbs that are going to look lovely during the springtime. I've got my big pot here. It's got a drainage hole in the bottom, which is really important for a big pot, otherwise all the compost in there will be sitting all soggy at the bottom. And I've got a good selection of bulbs here to plant. Now when you're planting a bulbs in layers or a big combination, sometimes it's called a bulb lasagna, it's important not to go too overboard and completely fill your pot with loads and loads of bulbs, because they will get a bit too cramped and might not flower properly. So try and make each level nice and evenly spaced, because remember, although the bulbs are going to be in layers, they have to grow through each other as well, and there's an awful lot of competition going on there. So give them all a nice bit of space, and remember that they also have leaves as well, which makes them bush out, so don't cramp them in too much. And the other thing to think about, besides colour and planting heights and things that will look nice together, is when the bulbs will flower, because not all spring bulbs flower at the same time. Some of them flower in early spring, some of them in mid-spring, and some of them in late spring. And ideally you should get some bulbs in a pot this size which can flower between early spring and towards late spring, but not too late, because I want this pot to be finished in around early May, because then I'm going to want to take everything out and put some summer bulbs in there. So I'm going to stop at plants that finish flowering in late April, which is usually tulips. Perfect for that. So I've laid them all out here in order of when they're going to flower, so that gives me a combination of colours for each part of the season. So starting with 𝗱cie vid'𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, which is really early flowering. That flowers around from as early as January, so usually around mid to late January that starts flowering into February. And then I've got crocus orange monarch, and I thought the blue 𝗱cie vid'𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 and the orange monarch crocus would look really nice together, and there will be a bit of an overlap because these usually start to flower in February, and so these are February into March. And then a little bit more of an overlap, I've got some botanical tulips here, Helen, which usually starts flowering in about mid-March, so there'll be a little bit of an overlap with those flowering at the same time as the crocus orange monarch. And I do like Tulip Helen is pink, and I do like the orange and pink combination. I think that's really bright, and in the spring that's just what you need. And so that's my January, February, March, with a bit of overlap in between each one, so that will look nice. And then also for March into April, I've got a white daffodil. Tone it down a bit on the colours, so I'm just going to put a few white daffodils in, just to look nice at the same time as the Tulip Helen. There'll be another overlap between those two, so these may start a little bit earlier or around about the same time as the white daffodils, so that'll be pink and white going on there. And then in April, that's tulip time, and I've got 3 different colours of tulips here. There's 10 in each bag, and I'm not going to plant them all in this pot because that would be way too many, but I'm just going to make my own little mixture. I've got a lilac perfection here, this one is Havran, and this one is Rosy Delight, so that's purple, pink and black. Just a little bit of black, because I think that combination of purple, pink and black looks really nice. So once you've planned out what you're going to plant in your pot, and how you can extend that season of colour from January right till late April, then you can think about whereabouts they need to be planted in the pot. So the bigger bulbs need to be planted deeper, and the smaller bulbs need to be planted shallower. So because the tulip bulbs here are the biggest, they're the biggest bulbs and they like to be the deepest, I'll plant those about 6 inches deep. Those will go in first, and these 3 varieties can all go on the same layer, and they'll be about 6 inches deep. Next I'll plant the daffodils, because they're a little bit smaller than the tulips. Well, these ones are. Depends what variety you get. Some daffodil bulbs, some varieties are huge, so they might end up being planted even lower or on the same level as the tulips. Depends how big the bulb is. Go by the height of the bulb and think it should be planted about twice as deep as it is high. So for a bulb this size, plant it about that deep. And then these early flowering ones are smaller bulbs, and I'm going to plant all 3 of them on the same layer because they're all about the same size. So plant them all at about 5 to 10 centimetres deep. I've got this botanical tulip, they're only small bulbs, and 𝗱•reticulata, they're actually really big for 𝗱▆ reticulata, these bulbs. They're lovely, and they're about the same size, so I'll plant them on the same level. Technically, because these crocus orange monarch are really small, they're quite a small variety, the bulbs aren't big, they could go shallower, but I think I'll just plant them all on the same level, about 5 to 10 centimetres deep, and they'll be fine. So that's how I'm going to plant them. So these are my earliest flowering and my smallest bulbs, my middle bulb and my deepest bulbs. They also happen to be the latest flowering. Right. Now, I'm not going to, once I planted a layered pot with alliums in as well, but I found that they weren't flowering until late May, by which point I had a lot of dead tulip foliage in the bottom, and it all kind of looked a bit messy, and I really wanted to yank the tulips out and just plant up my my pot with my summer bulbs. So I decided from then on I won't bother putting alliums in because they're a bit too late for a bulb lasagna. I think it's better to just stop at things that finish flowering in early May, and then you can clear it all out and start afresh at the beginning of the summer season with some summer bulbs. And the reason I'm holding these pots, these are ancient plastic pots, and when I've got a big pot like this, instead of filling it full of heavy stones and things as a drainage layer, or you can put broken crocks in, but I don't happen to have any of those, I have loads of ancient plastic pots like this, and I just put them upside down in the bottom of the big pot, because it acts as a drainage layer. It creates a well at the bottom, so the compost doesn't sit in wet soggy soil at the bottom. It also takes up a bit of room because these bulbs don't need soil that deep. They'll be all right, yeah, so they'll be absolutely fine with that depth. And also it makes it a bit lighter as well. If I wanted to try and move this to a different position on the patio later in the season, it's full of stones at the bottom, it's going to be really heavy, but with a bit of lightweight air in the bottom, that makes it a bit easier. Now, you can plant bulbs in any multi-purpose compost. I've got peat-free multi-purpose compost here, and I'm going to fill up my pot now to the level that I'm going to plant the tulips, which is about this deep. And remember to break up any lumps that come out of the compost bag. So it's nice and soft and fluffy for your bulb's roots to grow into. It is so exciting planting bulbs in the autumn and thinking about how lovely and colourful it's going to be in the spring. I can't wait to see these. And the earliest ones, it's November now, and the earliest ones to flower will be the 𝗱▆ reticulata in late January. And that's going to be lovely to see on a really cold winter's day. Right, so I've levelled out my soil there, it's this deep, and I'm going to put my tulips in. And by the way, all of these bulbs can be planted between late September and early December, they'll be fine. But tulips prefer to be planted in November. It's better to plant them in cold soil. If you plant things in warm soil in September, things might start to grow as well, which you don't always want earlier in the season. You want them to be planted while they're asleep and to stay asleep until the spring, ideally. So I think I'll start with 3 of each colour, see how I go. I want the layer with tulips in, I don't want to cram them in too much because they won't flower very well if they're too close together. So I want my tulip bulbs, once I've planted all 3 varieties in here, I'm just mixing them together. I want them to be about 10 centimetres apart from each other, and and that should be fine. I think I can do with a couple more. I'm trying to get an equal mixture of each variety. That should be about right. So that's going to be pink, purple and black. The 𝗱𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 is black, and that's a combination I always like. Right, so all together in this pot is it's about 40 centimetres wide. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 11 tulips in there, which saves some. I'll save some of these for something else. Right, so that's my first layer planted. If you have in your combination any other bulbs which are this size, you can put them in the same layer if there's room. Right, now I'm going to get my compost again, top that up. Right, I've put an inch of soil on top of that, maybe slightly less than an inch, because I want to plant my daffodils now, not too deep, so I don't want to fill it up too much. I want my daffodils to be about 10 centimetres deep, so just a little bit higher than the tulips. I've got 5 𝗳𝗍ci's polar eyes here. I don't want to go overboard on the daffodils. I think 5 will be enough just to cheer it up a bit in March, from March into April, just before the tulips come along, or just as the tulips are starting to show to bush out a bit with leaves. That will be. So these should be flowering among the tulip leaves. So I've planted 5 in there. They're at a nice spacing of about 15 centimetres apart from each other. 5 is a nice number to plant. Even numbers, if you had 4, I find it looks a bit odd, but 5 looks good. Right. Flip it up again. Right, so I've added another inch or so of compost, and now I am the depth of the soil is correct for planting the tulips, the botanical tulips. Sorry. Now these ones are smaller, which is why I'm not planting them at the same depth as the big hybrid tulips. These are little botanical ones that come back every year as well, but I'll probably put them out of the pot in spring. After they've flowered, and move them into the garden somewhere. Now these are pink and they're very pretty, and they're quite small. I'm just going to space these out evenly on this layer. Again, not too many, we don't want to overcrowd. And spacing these now at about 15 centimetres apart from each other, with one in the middle and the others around the edge. You could do it slightly, put a few in there if you wanted, in the middle. Depends how you want it to look. Now I just push those into the soil a little bit because I don't want them to topple over when I put the rest of the compost on. Right, so that's my botanical tulips. I'll save some of those for something else. And I'm also going to plant my 𝗱𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, which are the same size as the botanical tulips. They're all going on the same layer, so I'll just plant those in the spaces in between fairly evenly. I might put a few more of those in. They're so little and dainty, and if they're going to flower early, you can't really have too many as far as I'm concerned. So these will look pretty in from late January onwards, which will be a welcome splash of colour in the garden and very exciting to see. There we go. And then I'm going to also plant my crocuses on this layer too, because they can be about 10 centimetres deep, 5 or 10 centimetres deep. So instead of adding another layer of compost, I've got space here to plant the little crocuses in. It's not too deep for them. So there we go. On this top layer I've got all my little bulbs. I've got crocuses, which are going to flower, orange ones, and they're going to flower in February to March. I've got 𝗱•reticulatum, which are blue, and they're going to flower from January into February. And I've got botanical tulips, which are small little tulips. They only grow to about 15 centimetres tall, and they are going to flower from about mid-March into April, along with the daffodils that are below them. And fingers crossed that'll all be fine. When you're creating a bulb lasagna type layered planted pot, you have this image in your head of exactly how it's going to look, and it doesn't always work out like that, but they do always look nice. So that's good. Final layer. I've used almost a whole bag of compost in this pot. It's a lot bigger than it looks. You can really feel a lot of stuff in it. There we go. I'm not going to water it in because it's November and it's really cold and it's been raining pretty much every day, so there's no need to worry about that. Plus the compost feels damp enough, so they'll still stay nice and fresh in there. You don't really want to water spring bulbs throughout the winter. That'll be too wet. Just let the rain do that for you. I'm just going to put a bit more in. And there we go. There is nothing else to do with these. All these varieties are fully hardy. They'll sit dormant in the soil over winter and then pop up of their own accord in the spring. So all I need to do now is just wait with anticipation until the spring and see how it'll all look. And we'll post some pictures on Instagram if it looks good. Thanks for watching my video.